Hey guys, what's going on? Moto Drangus here, and that is not a ZX-14. Well, as you can see, I'm not on a ZX-14, and this is going to be kind of a different review, at least in style. Consider this a hybrid review. Since most of my riding is commuting, it makes sense that that's relevant to the topic, considering the ZX-14 used to be my commuter. Yet here I am on your old man dad jeans adventure bike, my Tiger 1200. It's alright, so it wouldn't be a review if I didn't talk about the bike, since I'm riding another bike. Alright, so here it is. This is a 2018 model ZX-14. Don't mind that. I want to talk about the differences. Basically the bike is the same, but it's got a really pretty new paint job. So I'm going to go through them real quick. It's still 1441cc. They may have made some small changes to engine parts. I don't know if they've lightened the cam profile, things to make it rev faster. That's usually the way they go with these late generation models. So one thing you're going to notice different is the Brembos. Similar rotor and brake size and same setup as far as the other one, but they are Brembos, so I can only imagine that's an improvement. It's got the same KTRC as the option, except now it's standard. They've done a powder coat on the exhaust, so it looks better, but there's still those big old piggy cans. Let's sit on the bike and see. Still got the same little cowl cover for the back. So sitting on the bike, it feels much the same, but you're gonna notice right away that one of the differences is now there's a sort of carbon fiber inlay for the cowl, the inner fairing. And it looks really nice now. They've gotten rid of the full paint and they've put in a nice textured material in there, but it's all familiar. Gauges are exactly the same. You'll be greeted with the headlights right when you start. Okay, so you've got your KTRC power and KTRC settings. Those can be changed over here. They've got it on full KTRC1. KTRC1 is your standard sort of minimal but just standard ABS setting and traction control setting. So that means that it's going to let a little bit of rear wheel spin. It's going to let a little bit of wheelie before the system kicks in and cuts power to the engine. You can see that the gauges are roughly the same, and there's the fuel gauge. They still haven't changed that, so it's still like the 4-bar system. Now they have in this case it's set up as a negative contrast. I don't know if you can see it good in the camera. Mine was the other way around. It was, you know, white background, black letters. I don't know that it makes a difference. Maybe you can change that in the settings, but here it is anyways. So it is a beautiful bike, and let's just go to the front. We'll just go make our way around the bike. So you can see same headlights. It's got your 3 on each side, your running light and your 2 low and high beams. Very good lights. Probably some of the best on any sport bike I've ever seen. Very heavy, stable bike. And you can see from the rear here, the rear profile. So same lights as the old ones. Nothing much has changed. And I suspect that you know, the Hayabusa and the ZX-14R are due for some kind of major update, maybe around the 2020 mark. So I'm not going to be riding this bike, but you know, this is what you're getting into. Now you can get in used at probably half the cost of new. I'm guessing this is around 14 to 15,000, something like that. By the way, I met Bob Lanfear's Beaverton Motorcycles, and thanks to those guys for pulling this bike out for me. They've always been great about that. So anyways guys, here it is. So if you're looking at getting on one, now I'm a 6'3" standing guy. Just one quick thing I want you to see, I'm flat footing. It's no problem. You could be a shorter rider. So anyways, there it is. Comfort. Well, comfort, I gotta be honest, is primarily why I'm on this bike. You know, the ZX-14 was really comfortable for a sport bike. That said, I've got an issue called rheumatoid arthritis, and certain joints in my body, namely knees, ankles, shoulders, and elbows, really get to hurting on that bike.
And so much of the riding I do, or at least I do, is commuting, which is what I'm doing right now, which is stop and go, slow moving, you know, in the Portland greater area. So there's times where a 15-minute trip takes an hour, and you're going to want some comfort for that. The biggest problem I noticed on the ZX-14 was after about an hour, my elbows would start hurting. And that was with risers installed. Other than that, the seating position was quite good. Knees hurt after about an hour because they're in that tucked position. Any sport bike had it. Next up, power. Well, man, there's just no substitute for that power. I mean, I'm on a 135 brake horsepower Triumph. That's no joke. I mean, this thing gets up and moves, and it'll get you in a world of trouble even. It's a little different on the ZX though, because you're talking, we were measuring almost 200 wheel horsepower, and it was really fun, you know, when you had the chance to get on it. But here's the problem: the only fun you could have on that bike was illegal, and unless you're on some kind of, you know, designated area for it. It's a nice BMW. Unless you're on some real nice straightaway for it, you know, you're talking jail time on that bike. The problem was it wasn't just a 0 to 60 bike, because in second gear, you know, you're over 100. So, you know, I found myself in situations like this where I'm having to go through school zones, and I'm going in 20-mile-an-hour zones. Very unenjoyable. Depends where you live, I guess. Now, going as far as rideability, really not much different than this bike I'm on. You know, in an upright sitting taller bike, you have some advantages with traffic, that is. I had the same tires on that bike as on this bike, the Pilot 4s. Good tire, you can ride them year round. It's cold, you can tell I'm in my winter gear, but you can ride it year round. That was really not an issue. The power really wasn't an issue either, because you could tune it down, so I never really had any issues there. Maintenance. Maintenance wise, the ZX-14 was kind of a pain in the ass. I mean, pretty good for a sport bike in terms of like comparing to maybe a Ducati or a BMW or something like that as far as cost, but short interval, high cost tune-ups. I did have a reoccurring issue with that bike, which you don't expect with a Japanese bike, where my exhaust headers kept coming off. Now, that was not a Kawasaki problem. That was based on, the pipes that the previous person put on. They just didn't like to seat themselves, and whenever they turned up the power as much as they could, it increased vibration, it increased heat, and bolts just started coming off. So after, you know, a couple of trips to the shop to figure out what it was at first, and that, we just had to Loctite the bolts. But having exhaust headers completely fall off of a bike is kind of like, holy shit. So I guess I'll give some overall impressions of the bike now. Overall perspectives, full disclosure, I will never buy a sport bike again. Never. To me, it's just not worth the money. No sport bike is, for me, because I don't go rip-roaring through corners. I don't trust myself to that degree. I'm not that experienced of a rider, so that's not happening again. That said, that bike was a lot of fun. You know, I think buying a $80,000, $90,000 sports car is infeasible, at least to me, in my lifetime. And it was a way for me to get that out of my system. And if you're looking for that, man, ZX-14, you can get one used for probably between $5,000 and $8,000. You're gonna have more power than you'll know what to do with. And so we touch on another issue. More power than you know what to do with. I never got to fully use all that power in that bike. I never got to hit 0 to 60s in 2.5 seconds because I'm not capable. I couldn't control the bike. I kind of, you know, as Dirty Harry said, a man's got to know his limits. And there's a certain point where the bike gets squirrely and I just don't do it anymore. And so I like power. I like excessive power. I like to have it when I might need it, you know. but I'm definitely not using all of it, and I'd rather have it in abundance. I find that I'm much happier just cruising at my, you know, in-town speeds. I'm not in as big of a hurry. I just enjoy the trip a little bit better. On the ZX-14, it's sort of like running a Ferrari through through that school zone that I mentioned earlier. It's not any fun. It sounds like crap. It doesn't want to do it. That bike, guys, that ZX-14 wants to go 80 plus, okay? One thing is you won't even be hitting top gear on a highway. It's just not really. It is a drag strip machine. That's what it is. That said, I don't regret buying it. And if that's what you're looking for, is I hate to use the term midlife crisis, but if you've never had the chance to own a high-end automobile, you know, motorcycles are the cheapest way to do it, and it's a bike that is pretty stable for what kind of power you're talking about. You know, one of the benefits the ZX-14 has over, say, an H2 is also that it's a double-edged sword that I mentioned earlier. The H2 is much lighter and it's got more horsepower. Well, the ZX-14's got a ton of horsepower and a ton of torque, and a ton of weight. And on the highway, that weight does play to your advantage. It makes it more stable. It makes it ride nice. It feels good. It's what makes a Goldwing feel good at cruising speed, you know. When you get it in its comfort sweet spot, I feel like a ZX-14 could ride at 120 to 150 miles an hour on a trip from say Reno to Vegas all day, and nothing would go wrong with the bike, and it would be purring even. Now you'd be chugging gas like you can't believe, but you're going crazy fast. That said, guys, bikes are cheap, and if you're like me, you may not know what you want or need right away. I've gone through a lot of bikes now, and it's like you sit on one in a shop and you go like, well, yeah, this is great. It's comfortable, you know, but you keep in mind you've only sat on it for 10 seconds. You know, it looks cool. It's got the power. It's got, I like the idea of the type of bike it is, and then you buy it, or maybe you test ride it, and then you buy it, and you take your first trip, and you're like miserable, you know, which that did happen to me on the ZX-14. I went on a 6-hour ride with my Harley bros, and you know, I was hurting at the end of the day, and those guys were just fine. And I realized real quick that it's like, okay, made a mistake. Overall, I have a mixed bag of emotions about this bike. Anyways, it gets a thumbs up and a thumbs down. Perfect bike for someone who's looking for sprinter trips and having some fun on a weekend, and far from perfect bike for me. And I never felt that you know, I had friends tell me, oh, that's a death machine. Why? Because it's fast? I mean, that's not you know, it's completely rider's choice. Just like any bike. I mean, you can make poor decisions on a Vespa and suffer the consequences. The speed is not the issue on that bike. Unless you're talking about going into a corner hot, which, well, then speed is the issue. Speed is the issue. And I'll tell you, it happened to me one time. Went into a corner too hot, and thank God it had those big brakes on it. Life in the city.